When you're an artist working in any creative field for any length of time, you see a lot of change. You see peaks and troughs, you grow, you evolve, and you walk a tightrope between expressing yourself authentically and making something that people value and want to buy. And that's not always easy. So, how do you know when it's time to move on and do something completely different? You read books and you watch YouTube videos about growing a successful business, and they all tell you the same thing. You need to niche down, specialize in one area, and grow a loyal audience and customer base that will grow with you. But when you hit a point where your business seems to stop growing and you're not making enough money to cover business costs, let alone living costs, it can be hard to judge whether you're still headed in the right direction. Do you try and ride out the storm in the hope that it'll get better? Or do you cut your losses and go on to something new? Over the last 13 years, doll making has been the area I've specialised in as an artist. But as things stand at the moment, that may be set to change. As I'm recording this, I have more questions than answers. I feel very much like I'm standing at a crossroads. I have to choose a direction, but every road looks kind of misty and I don't have a map. So I'm hoping that by making a podcast episode about it and talking through the options, maybe it'll bring some clarity. And if anyone else is going through the same thing, perhaps we can figure it out together. And at least you'll know you're not alone. When you start your own business, there's an accepted understanding that there'll be highs and lows. You give up on the idea of a regular weekly or monthly income and start looking at the longer term to gauge whether or not your work is viable. It takes years to build a business and success is very rarely linear. So your first instinct when things get tough is to sit tight and ride out the storm. You've spent years building up your business, so you're not going to throw it all away because you have a few quiet months. I set up my first business Facebook page and started sharing my art with the world back in 2011. And it wasn't until 2017 that I was actually able to go full time. So it was quite a long haul. But then up until 2020, I had quite a good run. I got to know when the quieter periods were going to be during the year, so I was able to make enough through the busy periods to make up for that. Out of all the different styles and media I worked in, it was the button-eyed cloth art dolls that made the most impact. They were selling fairly consistently, and if I had a quiet period over the summer, I knew that those dolls would sell quite quickly when the autumn came around. I never had a doll left hanging around for longer than a few months. So art dolls became my niche, and I built my business and social media following around that. Then 2020 happened. And the world changed quite dramatically very, very quickly. For the first time ever, we weren't able to send packages overseas from the UK. Everyone was struggling financially, and for many small businesses, sales dried up completely. The trouble with working in a three-dimensional media, making a tangible product like art dolls, is that unless you're very skilled in creative photography, there isn't really a digital equivalent. You can't sell art prints through a digital download. So like many artists and handmade sellers, I was pretty stuck. All I could do was hunker down with the rest of the world and wait for the storm to pass. Reopening a small business when the world finally opened up again was a strange experience. The only way I can think of to describe it is like one of those dystopian movies where somebody wakes up from a coma to find the world has completely changed and the rules are all different and nothing seems to work the same way. I think for a lot of artists and business owners, it's been disorientating to say the least. Both living costs and business costs have skyrocketed. People have different priorities and want different things. Social media has completely changed. The platforms and types of content that worked before don't work now. And those of us who are old enough to remember dial-up internet can feel like we're constantly playing catch up. In 2024, I've seen so many artists that I looked up to when I started, either quitting or on the verge of giving up. Many of us have been treading water, trying to stay afloat for the last few years while it gets harder and harder to make a living. It's pretty common to have a bad year or two in business, and as long as you're able to keep things ticking over and keep a roof over your head, sometimes it's just a matter of tweaking things and trying a slightly different approach while you're waiting for things to improve. But there's only so long you can keep riding out that storm before something has to give. You either drown or you start building something new. And this is something I've been contemplating myself over the last few months. In theory, if you've already done it once, you've gained years of experience building one business, so you have those skills already and it should be easier to build a new business, right? I mean, yes, starting over is an option, but it still takes time to build something new and there's no guarantee that any new venture will take off. So what do you do to pay the bills in the meantime? Here in the UK, government support for self-employed people has pretty much dried up in the last few years. While I do try to keep my living costs very low, I still need to eat. So if I completely switch to a new niche, it's going to mean taking on a part-time job. I think most neurotypical people would be like, yeah, why not? But as an autistic person, I tend to burn out very quickly. So trying to learn a new job and adapt to a new work environment whilst completely overhauling my business could be disastrous. In the eyes of the government, because I'm able to run a business on my own terms, I'm not seen as disabled enough to claim any disability benefits. Unless, of course, I run myself into the ground and make myself ill so I can't function anymore, in which case I might just about qualify. Aside from all that, I really do love making art dolls. Doll making has been my passion for the last 13 years. It's been the thing I've always come back to. Whatever else has been going on in my life, I've always been like, of course I'm going to make another doll. There's so many elements of the craft that I've yet to fully explore, and so many techniques I still want to learn. I could spend a lifetime making art dolls and still be growing as an artist. So do I really want to throw all that away? I've explored a few different kinds of business in the past. I tried jewellery making, reselling branded jewellery, sewing little accessories like purses and tote bags. I was even growing and selling pond plants at one point, but at the end of the day, I've always seen myself as an artist. And the only other thing that sparks the same kind of joy in me as doll making is illustration. Throughout my childhood, I loved to sew and I loved to draw. So if I do have to completely pivot my business and go in a different direction, illustration would be the way I go. One advantage with illustration is that there's a possibility of selling prints and greeting cards and maybe even books at some point. And if the world does shut down again, there's always the option of selling digital products. If you've been watching my YouTube videos over the last few weeks, and not as many people have seen those videos, those of you who have watched them, you're awesome, I appreciate you. Anyway, if you have been around, you'll have seen that I've been getting back into some pen and ink illustration and trying to develop some characters and weave them into some kind of story. I do see a lot of potential in what I'm building, but the way algorithms work both on YouTube and Instagram means that videos often don't get shown to the right audience. If you've previously built up an audience making sewing videos on YouTube, some of the audience will only want to watch sewing videos, and that's fair enough. The trouble is when an illustration video is shown to the people who've enjoyed your previous videos and they don't click on it, the algorithm assumes that it's not a good video, and then it doesn't show it to a wider audience. So what do you do about it? Well, one way around it would be to set up a complete new YouTube channel, but that would leave me right back at square one in terms of hitting the monetization requirements. It's taken 2 years on the current channel to get to the point where I can link my Shopify store and have my products underneath videos. So chances are it could take another 2 years to build up a new channel to the same point. The other possibility would be to unlist the best performing doll making videos on the current channel, so they're not bringing in new viewers who only want to watch doll making videos, and then wait for the algorithm to find a new audience. But that idea is pretty terrifying. I get so many comments and messages saying how much those doll making videos have helped people. I mean, in terms of the amount of views larger channels get on YouTube, my channel doesn't get that many views, but to me, every person who watches and gets something out of it is important. Every time someone thanks me for helping them figure something out, I'm connecting to another human being. I feel like unlisting my doll making videos and completely pivoting the channel would mean abandoning that small but very real audience. The option that appeals to me most, and kind of where I am at the moment, is to try and do both doll making and illustration and see which one takes off and becomes profitable over time. I'm not sure that's the best strategy and I don't know if it's sustainable, but doll making has been profitable in the past, so chances are it will be again at some point. If not, at least with illustration, there's the potential for printed products which might be more popular during the times when people don't have much money to spend on art. I still have the dilemma though of trying to balance two art forms on one YouTube channel or trying to maintain two channels at the same time. As I already said, my channel is still pretty small, so there's always the possibility that one video could take off and bring in a whole new audience. It may even be the case that the podcast takes off and I put more time into making talking head style videos while working on my art in the background. Right now it's summer in the Northern Hemisphere and that's always been the quietest time of year for me. The economy is also pretty awful right now. So my instinct is to explore a few different options and watch carefully to see how things develop in the next few months. I think the thing to remember is that a crossroads is not a dead end. You just have to pick a direction and keep moving. If one road does lead to a dead end, you can always go back and take another road. Chances are there'll be more crossroads along the way, and sometimes roads will converge and you'll end up going in the same direction anyway. It's confusing, it's scary, and it doesn't answer the question of how to pay the bills in the short term when nothing is working. An option that might seem glaringly obvious to some is to just accept that self-employment's not working, the business is failing, and to just go and get a full-time job. For me, this would be an absolute last resort. I've put my heart and soul into building my art business for the last 13 years. It's a huge part of who I am and it's part of what makes me, me. A neurotypical person might be able to work full-time hours in the workplace, then go home and create art as a hobby. But for me, being in a workplace where I'm not in control of the environment, all the workload is physically, mentally and emotionally draining. So I wouldn't have the energy to do the things I need to do to keep myself healthy, let alone happy. I've dreamed of being an artist from the day I was able to hold a pencil, and I'm not quite ready to give up on that yet. So whether it's doll making, drawing, painting, or making videos, this is me. I feel like this is what I need to be doing. So how do you know when it's time to quit? Well, I think the first sign would be if you've exhausted all the options and you can't keep a roof over your head anymore. Secondly, if you just don't love what you do anymore, there's absolutely no shame in deciding to do something different with your life. I don't feel like I'm there yet. I don't know what's going to happen next week, next month, or next year. Right now, it's a blank page in my sketchbook, but I've got some pens.